Good morning. I trust you've had a great weekend and you're ready to work diligently on your studies this week. I'm looking forward to work studying with you, reviewing the material myself, and reading your forum discussions. And I encourage you in your forum discussions to focus on questions related to the material you're studying this week. You can describe an article that you've reviewed, but I want you to really focus on mastering this process of making a valid argument. You learn to make valid arguments, it'll enhance your preaching, your teaching. Anytime you are trying to persuade people to your point of view, then learning to make a valid argument will so much enhance your ability to do that. And sometimes we want to make arguments or we want to state a position, and if we're not careful, we'll have illegitimate basis for expecting people to agree with us. I shouldn't expect people to agree with me simply because I'm a professor or simply because I'm a pastor. I need to give good, solid evidence and not argue from my position, but rather argue from evidence, argue from reality, and we gain credibility when we do that. And so every aspect of your communication or every area in which you communicate with others will be enhanced if you master and implement the material presented in this week's study. It is absolutely essential that you apply this reasoning as you develop your doctoral project. And so I would encourage you this week to read this material slowly, carefully, review this material, and be certain that you master these concepts. Let's look on page 112, and we want to notice some important terms, and we want to be certain that we understand their meaning correctly. First of all, we're making claims. A claim is an assertion. That claim could be a number of things. I could make the claim that if men spend more time in Bible study and the disciplines of the Christian life, they will have a great impact on the spiritual life of the church, or a positive impact on the spiritual life of the church. I have made a claim. Now, why do I think that claim is valid? I would then offer a reason for that. And I would state because men have great influence in the home and in the church. And when they deepen their spiritual life, that will be contagious and they'll be an example for others. And so I've offered a reason. Then I would need to offer evidence for that. And in offering evidence, I would cite biblical evidence and I would go to passages like Deuteronomy 6, perhaps, where the man is to teach. And I would look at other passages, Solomon in the book of Proverbs, father talking with his son would be some. And there would be others that I could use. But when I'm writing an academic paper, and even in preaching, while the Bible is the first and final authority, and if the Bible declares it, I'm going to stand with that, and I know you are as well. But we shouldn't be afraid of the social sciences, and very often we will find claims that we make, we'll find supporting evidence in those areas as well. So as we are writing doctoral papers, we need to first appeal to the Scripture, and we need to never minimize our commitment to the inerrancy and authority of Scripture. But in doing that, we should leave no stone uncovered in our quest to present all the evidence that's out there, and we should never be afraid nor intimidated by the social sciences as we are building arguments for leadership and interaction and communication and ministry in the Church of Jesus Christ. And so we look at areas where we can gain evidence, and then as we do that, we also need to look at the concept of a warrant. And as you look at the concept of a warrant, you find that on page 114. And no, a warrant is not that document that the law enforcement officer brings when he's going to take you to jail. That is true in that arena of life. But as we're talking about warrants, we're talking about a statement that connects the evidence with the claim that we've made. You know, sometimes we could make a claim that men enhancing their spiritual life will strengthen the spiritual life in the church as a whole. And then I could say because men are physically stronger than ladies. Uh, that really doesn't connect. That's not a good connection. I've not presented a good reason why there's a connection between the spiritual growth of men and the spiritual growth of the church. Or I could say because men are more mechanically minded than ladies are, and that would not be a valid warrant. In other words, what I need to do in a warrant, I need to show how the claim I make is, and the evidence that I present, or the reason I present, how there's a connection between those. Now, let's notice the example back on page 112. Uh, my claim could be that climate change is threatening coastal cities. That's a claim. What is a reason for this is because climate change is causing ocean levels to rise. So that's a connection. Climate change is causing ocean levels to rise, and that is impacting or threatening coastal cities. I still need to go a bit farther with that argument. What evidence is there for that? And I could cite studies, but still, what is the connection? How is that? And the warrant shows why the changing climate is causing the ocean levels to rise and in turn threatening coastal cities. Well, my warrant would be that climate change is causing the polar caps to melt, and as the great ice masses and at the polar caps melt, that raises the ocean levels, and in raising the ocean levels, then that's causing the coastal cities to suffer erosion, and I've made a connection there. And it becomes important that we make those logical connections and we don't leave anything to our reader's assumption because they might not assume what we hope they'll assume. So we need to clearly and carefully present our arguments. Let's notice another example of this as we turn over to page 116. And there's a claim made. The claim is made if that uh, climate change is also impacting health costs in our society. Now that seems like a pretty big stretch, doesn't it? And so my warrant is something that shows a connection between my claim and the reason I give. Remember that. Now let's look at the chart, and uh, because anyone would ask, well, what do higher health costs have to do with hard freezes or the lack of hard freezes? There doesn't seem to be a connection there. And if my argument's going to be valid, I must demonstrate how my reason or my evidence has a logical connection with the claim that I've made. Well, usually that would be based on a general circumstance. The general circumstance is when an area has few hard freezes, uh, it will pay. The general consequence is that it will pay more. It will cost more to combat diseases carried by subtropical insect no longer killed by hard freezes. And so now there's a reason why I've made a claim that at first seemed to be no connection at all. How in the world would would climate change or rising temperatures in the climate result in rising healthcare costs in cities? There simply seems to be no connection. But when you present a valid warrant, you demonstrate how these two phenomena are how they're connected. Because When the temperature rises, you don't have the hard freezes. Hard freezes kill insects that carry bacteria that spread diseases. And so when the climate is changing, the temperatures are rising. You have more insects carrying infectious diseases, and that in turn causes more people to become ill, and that drives up the cost of health care. And then hopefully the light comes on, and I realize, yes, what at first seemed like two disconnected statements, now I see a logical connection between them. And as you're writing, you do not need to assume that your readers will make the logical connection that you know when you're making a claim and you're giving a reason for that. And so that's why you need to be certain that you write clearly, concisely. You do not assume that your readers will know what you've studied. You need to present that information. And remember, in presenting that information, you need to give evidence, and that evidence needs to be documented. And so this week, you're going to be walking through the steps of making valid arguments. You already know this if you'll stop and think about it. And as you are writing, be certain. And by the way, as you're preaching on Sunday for you pastors, be certain that you're demonstrating how the claim you make and the reason you give, make certain your people understand how you are making that connection. If you learn to do that, it'll enhance every aspect of your persuasive communication. I look forward to you writing the post this week. I have given you the option of presenting either a question about the discussion matter about this reasoning, developing valid arguments, or I've given you the option of describing an article you've read, and you can still do that. But I really prefer that we spend our forum discussion time this week discussing this very important issue of learning to make valid arguments. This is going to be a challenging, but it's going to be a study this week that will reward you the rest of your life. Learn to make valid arguments in every area of life. God bless you as you study this week.